Hello everyone, welcome back to Ileum Biology. Let's proceed with our next class. In this video we would be having a discussion on autoimmune disorders. We have already uploaded the first part of this video. Now we are proceeding with the second part. Before watching this video, do watch our first part to get your concepts cleared. In this video I'll only be discussing about certain autoimmune disorders. The concept behind the autoimmune disorders has already been discussed in our last lecture. Now as I gave you a list of certain autoimmune diseases, and we discussed about SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, Graves disease and IDDM in the last section, and today we are having a discussion on ulcerative colitis, pernicious anemia, myasthenia gravis, multiple sclerosis and Sjogren syndrome. So let's start with first topic, that's called as ulcerative colitis. Now if I split the word, the first word is ulcer. We very well know what is ulcer. An ulcer is the damage of the mucosa or the epithelium, that is called as ulcer. And colitis, itis means inflammation and col means colon, that means the part of the large intestine. So in this case, in ulcerative colitis, you would see an inflammation of colon with ulcers present in the mucosa. In this disease, your autoimmunity attacks cells of the digestive system, your digestive tract, that is the alimentary canal. As you can see in this picture, this is an endoscopic view of colon, and in this view you can clearly see some ulcers present in colon. See the severity of ulcers. The entire mucosa has been degraded because of these ulcers. So this is ulcerative colitis. In this picture you can even see blood oozing out of those ulcers. So in ulcerative colitis, what happens, even there can be presence of blood in the stool. There would be diarrhea with or without blood, or sometimes even pus is present, and there would be a severe abdominal pain. Now next is pernicious anemia. Pernicious is a word which means gradually harmful, something which produces gradual harm. And anemia, EMIA, this is a suffix. Whenever it is used, that would be associated with something in blood. That means anemia is a reduction of hemoglobin or RBCs. Now before discussing about pernicious anemia, I'll have some discussion on the physiology. We very well know about the gastric mucosa, that is the mucous membrane present in the stomach. It has got certain cells, and one of the example is parietal cells. These parietal cells are responsible for release of a factor, a protein called as Cassell's intrinsic factor. Whenever this Cassell's intrinsic factor is released in gastric juice, this is responsible for the absorption of vitamin B12 which is present in the diet. So whatever we are taking externally, the source of vitamin B12, it gets absorbed into the stomach via CIF, which is released by parietal cells. Now in pernicious anemia, what happens, the autoimmunity, the autoantibodies attack the parietal cells, damaging them, and due to damage of parietal cells, CIF concentration gets reduced. Now because CIF has got reduced, so there would be lesser amount of absorption of vitamin B12, and vitamin B12, as we very well know, is very necessary for the maturation of RBCs. It is responsible for maturation of reticulocytes, that is an immature RBC into a mature RBC. What is the difference between a reticulocyte and a mature RBC? The presence of nucleus. A reticulocyte has got a nucleus, but a mature RBC don't have a nucleus, and this maturation is because of vitamin B12. Now when CIF is damaged, vitamin B12 absorption is hampered, and this deficiency of vitamin B12 would lead to hemoglobin deficiency, RBC's deficiency, which is called as anemia. In this figure, what we have shown the gastric mucosa absorbing vitamin B12 here, this way. This is the gastric mucosa, and it is absorbing vitamin B12 directly into the blood. But because of the absence of CIF, there is a cross sign, that means vitamin B12 is not getting absorbed because of absence of CIF. So this is pernicious anemia. Let's move ahead with myasthenia gravis. Myo is a word which represents muscles. Myosin, tropomyosin, you must have heard about these muscle proteins. Asthenia is a word which means weakness, and gravis means something very serious. So it is a serious condition in which muscles gets weakened. There are autoantibodies which are formed against acetylcholine receptors in the motor end plates. Now First, I'll have a look on the normal physiology of acetylcholine. As we have studied in synapse, what happens is this is a nerve fiber ending and this is a muscle which is called as motor end plate. Now, during the transmission of signals, the impulse from the nerve to the muscle, this is called as a synapse, and during a synapse, in the presynaptic membrane, there are certain vesicles called as synaptic vesicles which releases a neurotransmitter called as acetylcholine, and this acetylcholine gets into the synaptic cleft and interacts with the acetylcholine receptors present on the motor end plate. Now, when acetylcholine interacts with the acetylcholine receptors, these would stimulate the receptors, which leads to an opening of the sodium channels, and the sodium then enters into the motor end plate, causing an excitation potential in the muscle also. This is how a signal is transmitted from a neuron to a muscle. This is the action potential which is developed in the muscle. Now, in myasthenia gravis, autoantibodies damage the acetylcholine receptors. As you can see in this figure, acetylcholine receptors has got reduced in number, and that's why the acetylcholine which is released from the neuron does not interact with the acetylcholine receptor, and there is no production of action potential in the muscle. That means the signal is present in the nerve, but it is not getting transmitted to the muscle. Like say in this case, I want to move my hand. My brain is signaling the muscles present in the hand to move, but this signal is not reaching to the muscles of the hand. That's why I won't be able to control the movement of my hand. This is what happens in myasthenia gravis. Now, decreased neuromuscular transmission will weaken up the muscular contraction, and that slowly would lead to the wasting of muscles. Now, in some cases, the respiratory muscles are also involved. Now, that would lead to difficulty in breathing, and that would also lead to death. Like in this case, you can see this person is unable to move its eyeball and not able to close its the eyelids completely. In this figure, see, this man is not able to control its facial movements from this side, because the nerve that is supplying the muscle, so in this particular part, is okay. The nerve is okay, but it won't be able to transmit the signal to the muscles because of the problems in acetylcholine receptors, and that is called as myasthenia gravis. Now, listen to this carefully. In myasthenia gravis, there is no problem with the nerve. The problem is with the motor end plate, that is the muscle. Now, the next disease is multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis. Sclerosis means hardening of tissues. So, multiple tissues get hardened up, they are not under our control. Now, listen to this carefully. Now, in multiple sclerosis, the autoantibodies attack the myelin sheath of the neurons, which will damage the nerves. Look in this figure, these are the Schwann cells which forms the myelin sheath. These are the Schwann cells which form the myelin sheath. Now, antibodies attack the myelin sheath. Because of this, myelin sheath is damaged and the nerve fiber gets exposed. As we know, what is the function of myelin sheath? Myelin sheath is responsible for the insulation, and the gaps in between the myelin sheath are called as node of Ranvier, and these are responsible for the saltatory conduction of impulse. Now, the impulses would move in this way. This is called as saltatory conduction. Now, because of the damage of the myelin sheath, the saltatory conduction won't take place, and the neuromuscular transmission, the neuronal transmission becomes very slow, and it may even be absent. So, this is the difference between a healthy neuron and a neuron in multiple sclerosis. Now, when the protective myelin gets damaged, the nerve fiber is exposed, and the messages that travels along the axon, the nerve fiber, may get slowed down or even get blocked. Now, the signs and symptom of disease would depend on the part whose nerve has got damaged. Like if the nerve that is controlling the movement of my hand gets damaged, this hand won't be able to produce movements. Now, it depends on which nerve is getting damaged. Now, the difference between myasthenia gravis and multiple sclerosis, in both the cases your muscles won't produce actions, but in myasthenia gravis the problem was with the muscles, and in multiple sclerosis the problem lies in the nerves. If in some cases, which are called as the severe multiple sclerosis cases, the person won't be able to walk independently or won't be able to even walk at all, because the nerves which are responsible for the movement of the muscles of the legs are damaged and that won't produce any sort of movement. If I talk about the signs and symptoms, that all depends on which nerve is damaged. Like in case your neurons in the brain are damaged, then there would always be a fatigue. There would be cognitive changes. What is cognitive? What is cognitions? See, cognitive changes means your ability of judgment, your ability of speech, your ability of hearing. All these things are cognitive changes. Depression would be there, dizziness, vertigo, hormonal effects as your hypothalamus may get involved. Frequent urination would be there because the muscle stretch receptors present in the urinary bladder are their action get hampered. Incontinence of the urine, that means you won't be able to control your micturition. Difficulty in walking as the muscles are not getting signal from that nerve. Muscular weakness, stiffness and spasms. Spasm means muscular severe repeated muscular contractions, problems with this sexual ability. They can be constipation, diarrhea, numbness or pain in the hand or the leg because of the absence of signals. Blurred vision may be there because the muscles are responsible for the vision that won't work properly. Temporary blindness, or you may see certain dark spots. The last one in this category is the Sjogren Syndrome. Now Sjogren Syndrome is a triad of, first of all, dry eyes, then dry mouth and rheumatoid arthritis. We discussed about the rheumatoid arthritis in the last lecture. Dry eyes. Now dry eyes is a condition called as keratoconjunctivitis. Now kerato and conjunctiva. Itis is inflammation. That means inflammation of kerato. Kerato is cornea and conjunctiva. That means it includes inflammation of cornea and conjunctiva. That is both keratitis and conjunctivitis. Keratitis is inflammation of cornea and conjunctivitis is inflammation of conjunctiva. This is the condition. See, this is the conjunctiva. The epithelium that is present below the upper and lower eyelid is called as conjunctiva. It gets inflamed and there is also inflammation of cornea. Now both these inflammations would lead to blurred vision and burning and itching of eyes. Dry mouth is called as xerostomia. Xero is a word which means dry, as you must have heard this word in xerophytes. What are xerophytes? The plants that are able to grow in dry areas. So xero means dry and stomia is mouth. So there is dry mouth. See, during swallowing, saliva plays a very important role in lubrication of the food. Now in dry mouth there won't be much of lubrication. That's why there would be a difficulty in swallowing. And if you look at the tongue of such patients, you would see presence of certain fissures over the tongues, because this represents a dry tongue, and this is what happens in dry mouth or Sjogren's syndrome. And we have already discussed about rheumatoid arthritis in the last video. So that's it for today. That's it for all the autoimmune disorders that you should study. Thank you very much for watching us. Stay connected for such good informative videos. Thank you very much for watching us.